So what I'd like to do tonight is speak about what John Paul calls this, the theology of the body. That means that the body says more than it seems to mean. It says something about God, but it says also something about what it's there for. And I would like to offer you as much as possible the answer or parts of the answer of what God meant when he created man and woman as man and woman in a very different way, in a complementary way, but in a different way, so that we can maybe enlarge our way of looking at human love and sexuality, mainly in the question of what's the meaning. So what's important, I think, to start is to realize that each one of us is fruit of a union between two bodies. That means each one of us is fruit of a sexual act, of an act of love, which is quite amazing. And like you think God could have done this different, but he has done it in a way that is beautiful, and that means a lot, and it means much more than it means, for example, in the world of the animals, much more. So that means sexuality is something deeply wanted by God, designed by God. Like anyone who could think that God is somebody boring with whom we have to live eternity, well, if you think of sexuality, it's not really boring. I mean, it's something that can be very, very good. Obviously, it can also be complicated and it can also be dangerous. So we have to be sure that we open up to the fullness and ask the Creator, what did you mean? And I think it says a lot about who God is and how God is. Because if God creates something that is so delicate and so beautiful, and that at the same time needs so much attention and relation and encounter and respect, it says a lot about who the designer is, right? It's like when you see the microcosmos and the macrocosmos, you say, well, the designer, he is like that, right? When you see the beauty of a woman and the strength and the courage of a man and the innocence of a child, it says a lot about who the designer was. Right? You know that Michelangelo, when he did the Pietà, Michel-Ange, as we say here in France, right? Michel-Ange, whatever. He was afraid or worried that the people wouldn't believe that he did it because he was so young. So one night he sneaked over and he wrote in the ribbon that crosses Mary. He wrote in Michelangelo's Fecit. So he did it. And I always believe when you take a little, a flower or a grass on a lawn, I tell the little kids, if you look at it under the microscope, you find tiny little written made by God for you. So God basically through beauty reveals himself. And we spoke about that when we spoke about the sacraments, right? Being visible signs of an invisible God. Now, what's interesting today, we live in a time where the world seems to understand so well what life is about, right? And the world tells us everything, what seems to be important. But I think if you look at the internet, you probably find much more information on things that are not really important, right? Then you find really good information on the essentials. And I think for me, one of the biggest scandals is that the world tells us very, very, very little on what's the meaning of sexuality. It's such a central theme in a couple's life and in humans' life. We all come from there, and most of us live that through our life. How strange that the world has so little to say. You know, we live in a time of zero tolerance in questions of sexual abuse. Thank God. Thank God the world has made these steps. But nevertheless, we live in a time of 100% tolerance in pornography, 100% tolerance in prostitution, 100% tolerance in abortion. I say, that's strange. Isn't that a contradiction? Well, yes, it is. It is definitely a contradiction. Okay, but we seem so courageous. Like when you hear ministers say, the eldest people in society have to be absolutely the first to be protected against the COVID. Great. But the same party says we have to allow euthanasia. They say, wow, that's smart. Like, what are you saying? Make up your mind, make up your mind. Difficult. Because of sexual abuse, and we realize that in these years, since 10, 15 years, we're waking up to that, some of the deepest wounds have been created in human persons. But the state says nothing else about sexuality than how to avoid AIDS, how to avoid children if you don't want them, and maybe how to have children. That's what you learn in biology, right? And maybe how to use nowadays in school, how to use a preservative. You say, wow, great. Do you have anything else to tell us on that, dear state? Do you have any deeper communication on that? Well, no, silence, big silence. And for me, that silence is criminal. It's criminal because it's something that we all live in some way. We all are confronted to a sexuality. And it's amazing that the state that is capable of explaining so many things is not able to tell us what the Creator meant, right? If there's 40 million abortions nowadays per year, get it, 40 million abortions per year. That's more than any war has ever produced. I don't think it's because people don't know how to avoid being pregnant. I don't think it's because people nowadays don't know how to use maybe anticonceptives. Could it not be because people don't know what sexuality is really there for? If you have 40 million abortions, it means something in the understanding on what sexuality is meant to be is not there. Otherwise, this would not happen. I think it's important to see it like that, from that point of view. So what the church tries to do, the church tries to give in all that has to do with the human person, the church tries to give meaning, tries to give sense, tries to give understanding. And what you have to know is that in the philosophy of enlightenment, especially Kant and Hegel and Heidegger, they try to tell Christianity, you guys are in charge of love and God and faith and these things, but don't interfere in men. Like, we know what to do with our body, with our life, with our time, that's our business. And the church believes no, because if God became man, it is so as to reveal to us what man is meant to be. So for Christian, it's always essential to look at Jesus so as to understand, is there something I can learn about life? Is there something I can learn about love? Is there something I can learn about affection? Is there something I can learn about giving myself and about receiving? And there's a lot, obviously. So the challenge is maybe that the church has not always been very smart in communicating that. And I think maybe not you, but at least your parents and grandparents grew all up in a way, in a time where the church did not say anything about sexuality maybe because of not knowing, or maybe because of not having the right words, or maybe because also the church was very much ruled by men, and for men it's something slightly different than for women, at least in a certain dimension. So the church in many years basically, well, I wouldn't say they said no, but they said something like no. And the church, since John Paul II, more than ever says yes, right? That's John Paul II. So we have Nadia, who's from Poland, and we have one Polish representative here. So John Paul II really underlined very, very big the yes, but he said, yes, but try to find out what God meant. So what's important, so I would like to look with you from a phenomenological point of view. Okay, what do we see, and what does that mean? Then also from a scientific point of view, what do we see in the reality of the human life of human body, and what is different to the animals. And then also the biblical point of view. What does God tell us about it? And if you put these elements together, you might find some more elements that might help you to advance. Now, in all of that, this is important for you as a couple, not just because you're going to live that, but because the main purpose of your life is that you learn how to love. And as a human person and as a Christian couple, you even make a commitment to want to become professionals in loving, and in loving the way God loves. We said, when we spoke about the sacraments, if you just want to do your story, the two of you, you get married before the mayor. If you go get married in church, that means you want to do a pact with God so as to continue what he started. Therefore, I'd like to just begin with a word of Jesus, an important word. He says, and it's maybe one of the very few powerful commandments, love one another as I have loved you. Now, if God becomes man and says that to us, that means I cannot say, well, no. It means that my fullness depends on my path towards trying to love the way he loved. And actually, if we look at the life of Christ, his way of loving doesn't make us less human. It doesn't make us less happy. I think if all mankind would focus on how Christ loved, we will definitely get much further. So that's one thing he said, love one another as I have loved you. But then in an added way, during the Last Supper, which we celebrate in 1 week, he said, this is my body for you. We spoke about it when we spoke about the sacraments. This is my body for you. Christ gives his body for us. So in a way, in the church, Christ is the spouse, and the church, that means Christianity, we are the bride in a way. So he gives himself, gives us life to feed us, to make us grow, to make us reach fullness. Now, when Christ says, this is my body given up for you, I think it's important for you as a couple to learn. He's teaching us what it means, my body for you. He doesn't say, you are body for me. He says, this is my body for you. And on the cross, he then shows what he means. And that's why the cross is a key symbol for marriage, because on the cross we see what it means to love until the end, faithful in a total gift of self. And then in the end, he says, do this in memory of me. So this is a real mission statement. Very good. I'd like to start, first of all, with the fact and the reality that we all have our history in experience of human love, of sexuality, of couple love, of relation. We've seen things with our parents. We've seen things all around us. We've seen things in TV and internet. We know Christ dying on the cross, and we know James Bond getting to know a girl, and boom, next moment he's in bed with her. We say, well, that's quite a gap from one to the other, okay? And let's try to get the best out of all of them, you know? So we all have a history. And it's interesting to think that for some of us, maybe this history began the first time you experienced something that has to do with sexuality. Maybe you experienced joy and peace and happiness, but maybe you experienced shame and curiosity and bad jokes. Maybe it was an experience of peace, and maybe it was an experience of a shock. Maybe there was a silence from the parents. Maybe the parents taught you. Maybe the school taught you. Maybe pornography taught you. Maybe some people experience some form of abuse. Nowadays, even in Europe, you have 2 to 3 girls out of 10 experienced some kind of abuse by the way of being looked at, by the way of being handled, even in families, etc. Maybe some way of manipulation. So I think it's very difficult that a kid nowadays, that most kids in the age of 8 or 10 already see for the first time some image of pornography, that kids grow up in a completely good order. Like there's all a big confusion. And I think it's important to form. I think the order nowadays, many times kids experiences first, sexuality means first pleasure, it means me, and then later it means us, and later it means commitment, and later it maybe means life, and finally it will mean final and definitive commitment, and communion becoming one. Okay, so it's an order of things that in a way takes time. Right? And all of you, when you're somewhere in your 20s and 30s, when you have lived many, many years of basically experiencing sexuality in the beginning for yourself, and then have to learn to live it as something together and for the other. So it's a challenge that's in front of us. Also, what's important is that in a way there's a defragmentation. There's many factors that belong together. Love, life that can come, pleasure, communion, communication, gift, receiving, all of that comes together. And many times this is experienced in a separated way. Now we all have our personal history with our personal good experiences and bad experiences, with our personal maybe acts of generosity and fidelity, and maybe with our mistakes we've done. And I think all of that is normal because that's the way the world is. Now, what I would invite you to do is very consciously to whatever there is in your life, in your past, to put it before God and say, okay, this is me until now. I would really love to know what you meant so that I can choose the best for my spouse. Yeah. And that our children can be born in a way of love that is lived in total truth and as much as possible according to the fullness of your plan. Lord, if you can be with us when life comes forth, then our kids from the very beginning will be involved, surrounded, sheltered by your presence. So I think living sexuality in a way in our relation with God is something very important to learn, so as to give the best to the other, but mainly so that your children from the very beginning, the first thing they experience, so to say, is God who's present in your couple. Like imagine they experience that. Imagine the first thing when the two cells meet is the presence of God because you've been praying that day together. Imagine a kid begins like that. How amazingly beautiful. I think the smaller an embryo is, the more impact the surrounding has. Like if you hit me with a hammer on the head, it hurts. If I hit a 2-year-old kid with a hammer on the head, it hurts much more. And I think if you do harm to an embryo, it hurts more. And so the smaller a kid is, the more impact love and presence of God has. So I want to invite you that the more God is present in the beginning, the more powerful this impact must be. Now, I think what's important also, if we look at what we see, we're very different to animals. And I think it's beautiful to recognize that. John Paul II said that we could think that what makes us similar to God is our spirit, and what makes us similar to the animals is our body. And John Paul II says, no, that's not the case, because our body is different to the bodies of the animals. Our body is not just for reproduction. That would make us similar to the animals. If we would use our sexuality just for reproduction or just for our pleasure, that would make us similar to the animals. But for us, it's much more. And we'll try to have a look at that right away. So I think for animals, it means reproduction. It's the instinct that coordinates everything. Many times there's a question of force, of submission, of impulse. And for men and women, it can mean encounter, relation, face-to-face, communion, fidelity, commitment, gift, uniqueness, tenderness, attentiveness, humility, forgiveness. All of that can come together. Very, very different. So it's good to say, like, it actually has very little to do with the animals. We're very different, and we're meant very different. Also, it only works fully if it's a stable relationship, it's an exclusive relationship, it's a faithful relationship, and it's according to the needs of the two, right? Men and women can only live fullness if the other one lives fullness. We can only reach fullness of happiness if the other one reaches fullness of happiness. And you know what? I'll tell you, I've spoken with many couples after years many times this theme of sexuality becomes a theme of silence. It becomes a theme where we don't say what we feel. We don't say what we think. We don't dare to say. Parenthesis, if one day you reach a point where you don't dare to say something to your spouse because you're afraid of the other one's reaction, bad news, you have to act. You have to act, very important, okay? Because you need to be a team, a really good team. We see that for a woman, it has a lot to do with tenderness, with kindness, with cordiality, with being empathic, being very close. You know, when you see the way women greet one another, they hug much longer, they rub one another's shoulders much more, they say nice things to one another the whole time. Like when guys greet, they normally big clap on the back and a punch on the shoulder. It's different. Okay, we're different. But it's very important to observe these things because like a man has to learn, for example, if I'm not kind, like trying to go towards a sexual relation is almost violent. If I'm not kind, if I'm not tender, if I'm not attentive, if I'm not taking serious the other's needs, I'm actually not helping at all the other person. So grumpiness has to be something we have to learn to handle. But at the same time, a woman has to know that for a man, it's not just a physical thing. It's not just that he's a guy, he needs that. That would be ridiculous. And that would be treating men like animals, right? So for a man, you know, although they're big and strong or whatever, many times they feel fragile, they feel burdened, they feel isolated, they feel alone, they feel inadequate, although they have to pretend the whole day that they're not. Deep inside their heart, they have complexes, no? Although they're strong and they may be proud, but inside, many times they're lonely. And they need to feel that at least at one place in the world, I'm appreciated, I'm needed, I'm awaited, and I'm my wife's hero. A guy has to feel that. A guy has to feel that he's the hero of his wife, and that he can offer his strength to give her peace and to shelter her. But a girl has to perceive that she is desired in the way she needs. And for example, if you look at the way a woman takes a child in the arms, for the guys, try to observe that. It's very nice. And when you see all the thing a woman does with a child, that's a form of affectivity a woman lives, and that's a way of communication for a woman. I think it's beautiful that for a woman, that part is, I think, super, super important. And for us, for men, I think, nice to be attentive. Okay, well, just, and yeah, maybe also one reality that I realized there. I think it's the way of finding the path to the other's heart. Like a man to a woman's heart is via the tenderness, and a woman to a man's heart is many times via the closeness and the physical relation. Now, I would like to go back to a much more basic question. The question, what did God mean when he did us like that, when he created us like that? And now John Paul II, the Polish Pope, he said, instead of doing what the church did before, when the church used to speak about morals and even about sexuality, the church used to say, well, that's what you're allowed to do and that's what you're not allowed to do. Okay, basically there was like a code of conduct, if you had a big book telling you like what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. It's not exactly like that, but it was a bit like that. Okay, it's basically as if you would have a book telling you what you're not allowed to do with a fork and what you're allowed to do with a fork. And John Paul II said, and how about if we write a tiny little book on what is a fork? And then we, church, don't have to tell you what to do and not to do. Basically, John Paul II said, let's not treat the people like kids. Let's not treat them like immature youngsters. Let's treat them as adults. The church doesn't have to tell us what is right and wrong because we have a conscience, we have an intelligence, okay? We have a sensitivity. we are aware of things, we have a heart. Now, but what we have to know is what God meant. So what John Paul II tries to tell us, what is the meaning? Why God created a man as a man and a woman as a woman? Why did he create us in a different way? Why are our bodies so greatly complementary and so greatly different at the same time? Why is the woman's way of feeling so different than the man's way of feeling? Why is almost everything different and at the same time so complementary? Why can this only work, this communion, if I learn your language? Because love is giving and receiving. Love is not taking, right? As I mentioned to you once, the identity of God is not, first of all, being a creator. The identity of God is not, first of all, being all knowledge. The identity of God is giving himself. And it's very beautiful to think of God, of somebody who is constantly giving himself. And he created us similar to him. That means your deepest identity, and you can only become a happy person if you learn fully to be a gift for the others. It's an interesting exercise that you could do. You're trying to think of your different relations, of your parents, of your brothers and sisters, of your fiancé, of people you have around you, and ask them, in how far am I a gift for my father, for my mother? In how far am I a gift for my brothers? Where am I more on the consuming side? Where am I more on the serving side? In how far do I accept fully my father? In how far do I accept fully my mother with his and her ways of being? Because my capacity of loving will depend mainly on in how far I'm able and capable of giving myself to my spouse and receiving my spouse. So giving and receiving is key. And that's why the marriage promises, I give myself to you and I receive you. Right? But it's really the key. So the essence of God is that. And the essence of our life is meant to be that. Now the problem is, as we remember, because of original sin, we have something in our heart that wants to take, that wants to manipulate. And that is not because we're bad, that is simply because we're wounded. And this wound makes that we have a difficult time in being completely in peace and being just in an attitude of giving. Good. So John Paul II created us to his image and likeness. He made of us a sign. And the idea is that the human person in the world is a sign of this goodness. I remember I was in Geneva every now and then, and I used to go to a little chapel in Vendôme that's called Saint-Jacques. A little chapel is called Saint-Jacques, and there was an old couple that were living there just right next to the chapel. And this old couple, I mean, just to see them, it made my heart go soft. They were so good together. They were so kind together. And then she would approach me and say, "Bonjour, papa." And she would take my hand, and she was like 90 years old. She would take my hand in such a tender and kind way. And then when they would pray, it was just so beautiful to see that. And you could see really in this old couple and this lady, you could see, my goodness, if a 90-year-old woman can be so beautiful. She was all covered with wrinkles, you know. And I thought, if a 90-year-old woman can be so beautiful, how beautiful must the Creator be? No? How much she must have loved, how much she must have given. So, as individuals, we're a sign, but as a couple, you're much more of a sign than just as individuals. Okay, so I would like to have a look at you. If we take just the human face, okay, you take the human face and you look at the eyes of the human person, because I think when John Paul II says, "What did God mean?" He says, "I won't tell you, you tell me." And he says, try to think, try to observe, try to analyze, try to see what you see, and try to think what it means. Like when you find a fork, or when archaeologists, right, or find a tool from prehistoric times, well, the first thing is they will try to find out what it was there for. They will not say, oh, I know. No, they will try to find out. And when they observe it, they will see, well, obviously this is probably to cut, and this is probably to build, and this is probably like a fork, and this is probably to eat, whatever. So if we look at the body, for example, and you look at the eyes, okay, human eyes, and you look at the eyes and you try to see what you can do with the eye. And you can ask yourself, what is the most noble action you could do with your eyes? That's a strange question, right? But you could ask you, what is the most noble thing you could do with your eyes? Okay, you can do more than a pigeon, for example. A pigeon can only look, or a chicken, you know, like this. So we can do more. We cannot just look or see. We can communicate. We can console. We can forgive. We can receive. We can do a lot with the eyes. And we should ask ourselves, why can we do that? Why can a pigeon not do that? Why can a bear not look in a forgiving way? He can't. Man can. But a bear can also not look in a punishing and humiliating way. He can't. A duck can't look at you in a provocative way. It can only look at you as a duck. Why is the human person so different? And that means actually that in our eyes, there is a mission that's written in your eyes. And the mission that's written in your eyes is corresponding to the greatest thing you can do with your eyes. So the mission that's written in your eyes is give life, give peace, give courage. Try to imagine the guys here. Once you have kids, and imagine you have a boy and he's 7 years old and he makes a race with the others and he's first and then he slips and falls and the others run by him and he arrives last, okay? And he's all sad and he comes to you and you just by looking at him without saying one single word, you can tell him you were the best and you will always be the best and I'm proud of you. Without saying one word, you can say that just with your eyes. So this is super powerful. The other side is true also. If a man or a woman does not look in the right way, we can also create wounds. For example, if a person has had a father or a mother that was alcoholic and never looked at his child, well, there's like a black hole in the heart. And the kid is always longing for being looked at and loved. So for a father, for a mother, it's super important to look in the right way. For a mother, it's maybe more natural because there's this natural communion between the faces. For men, like even babies, when you have little babies, girls look, like if you look at the baby, girls look at you for ages. And boys, like if there's a noise, they look away. And your girl looks at you. So we handle this in a different way. The same thing with the mouth. The mouth tells us, you know, we can eat, we can smoke, we can spit, we can praise, we can curse. We can do a lot of things with our mouth. What is the greatest thing we can do with our mouth? Well, the greatest thing is probably we can forgive, we can praise God, we can tell you're beautiful, we can do great things in that sense. So the greatest thing you can do with every body part is definitely what God meant when he created it, okay? What can you do with your hands? With your hands, you can destroy or you can build up. You can caress and console or you can hit. You can provoke. The Italians have a great capacity of speaking with their hands without saying one word. And it means 1,000 things, no? And we strangers don't understand that. No? He does like that, and that means whatever, you know, you're stupid. Well, we don't mean that. No? You can do like that, no? He can do like this, it means eating, and he can do like that, and it means, hey, what are you doing, you know? So with the hands, we can mean a lot, but we can do a lot of evil with our hands. And we've all done good things with our hands, and we've all done wrong things with our hands. Like our eyes, our mouth, our face, our hands, we would almost need, you know, a permission to use it. We almost need a school, you know, what are the body parts for? So what I'm trying to say, we don't need the church to tell us what is right and wrong to do with our body. We need to think honestly and try to say, okay, what is the best thing we can do? And if you look at the sexual part of the body, I don't have to tell you. I mean, you know, you realize, well, there's moments, there's places, there's meanings, and there's things they're definitely not made for, right? And it's enough to see how the animals use that way. Well, they just use it for reproduction, nothing more. We can use it for more, but I think what we have to know, it's made for communion mainly, and for life, and for being a gift for one another, right? That's the main elements that are inside. It's made for giving myself completely. It's made for receiving yourself completely. It's made for being faithful and unique and exclusive. And it's made for life. And it's made for tenderness. And it's made for forgiveness and for all these kind of things. So I think it's important that each one of you try to just realize, just study, just analyze, how have I handled my body in the past? How have I handled the body of others in the past? And without being afraid, what of that was right, what of that was wrong? So as to help ourselves, because we can find that out kind of, and I think if we're sincere, again, what I would like to suggest to you, you don't need the church to tell you. You have an intelligence, and that intelligence tells you, well, it's definitely not for looking for our own pleasure, because that's a nonsense. It works, but it says constantly, no, I'm also made for life, so it doesn't make sense. But it's maybe less easy because all that has to do with the affectivity, well, it's less clear because there's a lot of feelings mixed in. We'll get to that right away. Because it's not so easy to be 100% sure, God became man. God took a body. And he took a body and he showed us what he did with that body. Okay? This body was an instrument of salvation. This body, these hands that Jesus used, he would cure people. With his eyes, he would look at people and give them, like just think, Zacchaeus, who was sitting on a tree, okay? He was the tax collector, hated by everyone. Why? Because he would take the money from his brother Jews, give it to the Romans, and get a part of it for himself. Great, you know? Like you can't be more hated. No? For those of you who have not yet seen it, the series The Chosen speaks about the gospel and about the beginning of the life of Jesus and the apostles. But instead of telling you fully the gospel story, it tells you basically what happens in the hearts of the disciples when they begin to discover Jesus. Who has not seen it, go for it and look at it. It's just fantastic, I think. It's really fantastic. It's a great, great, great story about getting to know the beginnings of our church. Great movie. So when he would look at Mary Magdalene, for example, so the woman that was found as an adulterer and was put in front of Jesus, and every man, the man that brought her there said she was caught in adultery. And you know, I try to imagine, was she caught alone in adultery, or was there also men, or was there just Mary Magdalene? Maybe there was just Mary Magdalene doing an adultery. Maybe not. And why do these men know that she was doing it? Well, they were spying on her. Well, great. So, and everyone was looking at that woman as an instrument of pleasure. And they put her in front of Jesus. And we don't know what happens, but we know that Jesus first looks down. He doesn't look at her first. And he writes in the sand. And then the people say, well, Moses said, well, we should stone a woman like that. And Jesus doesn't react. He leaves them with their condemnation. They have to hear themselves again, you know. And finally, he says the famous phrase, who of you is without a sin, go ahead and throw the first stone. These are these phrases that Jesus had eternity to prepare for, and so phrases that you can't say anything against. But as a matter of fact, they all went away. First the eldest, then the youngest. That's a reality you'll see. Also, the older you get, the more you get to know yourself. But then something happened, and we don't know what it is, but Jesus looked at the woman, and he said, where are they all? Did they not condemn you? And she said, no. And he says, nor do I condemn you. Don't sin anymore, go. And the way he looked at her, he must have been probably the first man in a long time that looked at her not as a body to use, but as a child of God. From that moment on, she will never, never, never let go of him anymore. She was healed by one look. I think this is so powerful if you think, what the body is capable of. So try to be aware. The whole body says life. The whole body says gift. The whole body says communion. The whole body says, I receive you. The whole body says all of that. Mm-hmm. So the greatest thing we can do, and the fullness of that, is you look at Christ on the cross. Christ on the cross giving, saying, I give myself to you. This is my body given up for you. I think simply beautiful to realize and to think about it. What is the best and most precious thing we can do with it? And that's God has written in all our body a mission. I would like that to leave that as a couple for you to figure it out and to even speak about the body part. So to say, we don't have to do this here. And to say, what is the most precious thing you can do with that? What is the most fruitful thing? What is the most well-doing thing? What makes you the best person? Because it's all written inside. Nobody has to tell you. Okay. Now, John Paul II, what he did when he was a bishop of Krakow in Poland, he saw the problem of prostitution, and he said, how strange, why does this exist? Why do people do that? That was surely not the Creator's plan. So what he does is he takes the Bible and opens the Bible in the very beginning. And he says, let's see what God says there. Okay. In the very beginning, there's the phrase, when God creates man, first man is alone. Okay. And God says, it is not good that man is alone. I will create a help for him. The word help is not help in the sense of a help in the kitchen or a help to clean up something, but the word help that is used in the original text means somebody who saves man, somebody who can really save man from loving wrong. Okay. Now, what he first does is, okay, why is it not good for man to live alone? There's an original loneliness. First, man is alone. And the loneliness, why is it so difficult? It's difficult because man is different than other beings. So God says, okay, it's not good that you're alone. I will create other beings. So he creates the animals first. Okay, that's you remember when we spoke about the sacraments, about anthropology, we said that there's the symbolic books. So the symbolic books, it's not important that the world was created in 7 days or 7 billion years or 1 billion years, whatever. It's important to see the order of things. So he creates the earth, he creates the plants, he creates man, and then he creates where he presents the animals to God, to man, and man sees the animals, and man says, I can be in relation with them, but I'm different. I still feel lonely. Why does he feel different? Because he realizes there's a burden on him. The animals are not free. He is free. He has to choose freely what is right and wrong. Do you remember when we said the instinct makes that the animal always knows how much to eat, how long to sleep, how to use the reproductive elements. Man has received freedom, And God says, go ahead and figure out what's the perfect way of using this, but you're free, so you can also use it wrong. And so man feels a burden because he says, it's difficult to be responsible. It's difficult to be responsible and being alone. And the animals are different. They like, I can relate to them, but I can't give myself fully to them. I can caress them, I can give them food, but I can't give myself fully. I can't be in communion with them because my body is not made for the animals. It's different. I can't communicate with them in the same way. So God says, John Paul II says it was a test, so to say, where the man would understand that he's different. So God makes a sleep fall on Adam, and then he creates the woman. When he creates the woman, Adam wakes up and sees the woman. Adam is naked, the woman is naked. You remember, they were naked and did not feel shame. Adam sees the woman and says, this now is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone. She will be called woman, okay? So Adam sees her, and he does not see in her, you are all that I need so as to feel good. But he sees in her, now that I see you, and even I see your body, I realize that all in me, even my body, can become a gift for you. So not just spiritual and intellectual, but even my body, now that I see your body, I realize that my body now makes sense, but not for myself, because a body for itself never makes sense. It's always incomplete. That's again the challenge that we have as priests. In a way, we are incomplete versions because we're not in couples. So in a way, there's something that will always be missing. Now, when God asks us that, obviously He gives us something that fills this need more than abundantly if we're in a relation with Him. But Adam sees his body, he sees the body of his wife, and he says, now by seeing your body, I realize that I'm a gift for you. I realize that I'm perfectly made for you. I realize my hands, my eyes, my way of thinking, my strength, my sexuality, they're made to give you shelter. They're made to protect you. They're made to make you happy. They're made to caress you. They're made to give myself to you. They're made for life. They're made for communion. They're made to be a gift for you. Now, what's very important is when we, maybe for the first time, see another body, we might have not only these feelings. We might have rather the feeling, I want you for me. Or I want you to look at me. And I want you to desire me. Or I want to have you for me. That is inside of our heart. And maybe we can never get rid of it completely, maybe. But we can definitely say, okay, well, that is something where I want to have Christ come in and reestablish peace in my heart. So, first of all, original solitude. Man feels alone. He needs somebody else. He doesn't need somebody else so as to not be alone. He needs somebody else so as to be able to give himself, to be a gift. Then there's what John Paul calls it original nakedness. Nakedness without shame. That means the bodies between Adam and Eve were invitation to be a gift for one another. When they saw one another, they felt not shame and they said, okay, now I realize I can be a gift for you and we can be there for life and we can be together and we're made for one another. And so they were made for an original communion. And it was a natural thing to be in communion with one another. Then, as you remember, when the umbilical cord rips, okay, between God and the embryo, so to say, between God and the human person, in that moment comes the fall. And what does the fall do? What does the separation do? What happens when God is not anymore fully in our heart? In that moment, well, man becomes less than God and potentially more animal, because we are a spirit that lives in a body, but if we take God out, well, there's a lot of body remaining and very little spirit. So after the fall, there's a problem, because instead of realizing solitude, I need you so as to give myself to you, after the fall, I need you becomes, I need you for me. The original nakedness that was seen as your nakedness helps me so that I can become a gift, suddenly becomes an obstacle for pure love. Suddenly the nakedness of the other becomes complicated. My own nakedness becomes complicated. And it's difficult to be a real gift for the other person because we are so different. It's difficult to understand the needs of the other person. And this will stay a challenge, but the more God comes into our couple, the more this can be strong. So after the fall, also the community became complicated and became a place of potential conflict. So the redemption is when God becomes man and begins to live in us again, he tries to teach us to make a commitment as a couple, and he comes into the couple. That's why we do the sacrament of marriage, because man and woman alone, they cannot live the fullness. He tries to teach us how to form in us a pure heart. We'll speak about it afterwards because it's very, very important to understand what it means, a pure heart. Okay? It doesn't mean not to have bad ideas, or doesn't mean not to have temptations. A pure heart means an undivided heart. But we'll understand what it means right away. I would like to give an image to you in that sense, so as to realize that we all have in our heart the capacity of this original idea of God. Okay, we all have the capacity of looking at the other in a very different way. Today, I spoke with a man who said to me, "I have a problem with women because I look too much at women's beauty, and I'm not sure if it's so good." And I said, "Are you married?" I said, "Yes." "Do you have children?" He said, "Yes." "Do you have daughters?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Is there a difference between the way you look at your daughters and the way you look at your wife?" No, and the way you look at other women. He said, "Yes, big difference." Okay, I understood. Okay. And it was very nice to see. I didn't have to tell him what is right and wrong. He just immediately understood, wow, I have a very different way of looking at somebody else than at looking at these women. And like first he said, it's not that bad, and because I'm not doing harm to anyone, but he realized something was not right. And so I'd like to tell you a little story. I spoke with a young couple that were fiancés once. Because John Paul II, he says, he speaks, he takes in the Bible as the book of Tobit. I mentioned it to you when we spoke about anthropology, and I spoke about the symbolic books. And John Paul II uses the book of Tobit so as to speak about how human love is right and how human love can be wounded. So the book of Tobit is a book of a man who meets a girl that was married 6 times. And every time in the night of marriage, the man died who got married to her. And not because she was a bad woman, but it's a symbolic story, okay? So it's not a scientific story. And he says every time the man died because the man was looking for himself. That's the story of the book, okay? So basically, like there was a spirit that did not allow man to persevere because love was actually killed. So Tobit finally arrives, and he's a good Jew, and he is looking for the right thing. And the night of the wedding, they go up to the room, and then he says, "Get up, my sister bride. Get up, my sister bride." Okay, takes her hand, and he says, "Let us pray." And then they say a beautiful prayer. By the way, this can be a very nice reading also for for a wedding. And John Paul II is fascinated about the sister bride, my sister bride. What does that mean, sister bride? Like, it's different to love a sister than to love a bride. And he says, if you want to learn to love your spouse like a spouse, you first have to learn to love him as a brother, as a sister. So I was with a young couple, both French, and I asked him, do you have a sister? He said, yes. I asked him, have you ever kissed your sister? He said, yes, once. And I thought that was so sweet for him to say that, I can imagine, very shy guy, And I said, why did you kiss her? And he said, because she was sad and I felt she needed it. I said, wow, that's beautiful, And I asked her, is there a difference between hugging your brother and hugging your fiancé? And she said, oh yeah, huge. When I hug my brother, it's for him. And she said, I don't even expect him to love me. I just want to make him happy. Full stop. When I hug my fiancé, definitely there's a big part in me that is looking for myself. And so I spoke with them and I asked them to write that down. So they're quite smart and they wrote down a nice little page, basically to try to analyze what does the brotherly, sisterly love, it's not one or the other, but it's one and the other. What would that add to our fiancé and conjugal or spouse love? What would it add? Okay, so I asked them, what does the love to a sister or to a brother add to the love of a spouse? What is different? And they all tell me the difference is your sister, your brother, you forgive them much quicker. You know that you're not gonna change them, so you accept them much more. You love them not for yourself, but you love them because you feel the need. Like if I think of my sister, if I see her sad, I would do anything to make her happy. And I wouldn't even dream of asking her something for that. Crazy. Like it's my greatest honor to do that for her. And for my sister, the same with me. Like her deepest desire is to make me happy. And she would never dream of asking something from me for that. Can you now also make me happy because I did that for you? Obviously not. And not just not, but not at all. So why am I telling this to you? Because I want to show you, for those of you who have a brother or a sister, and you can think of that brotherly love or sisterly love, that actually you have inside of you a knowledge of a love that you have already experienced, and that is very, very innocent and very free of anything looking for yourself, totally free of that. Okay. And I think it's fascinating because it shows that, try to imagine if you could practice, big challenge now, if you could practice from now to your wedding, if you could focus on practicing that kind of love, and when you feel like you want to take the hand of your fiancé, or you want to hug your fiancé, or you want to be very effective or very affectionate, and you try to think, am I doing this for me or for you? And goes one step further. You can say, am I getting married for me or for you? Etc. And try to practice in yourself to love you for you, because that's the way God loves. You see. So it's not because we should do that because the rest is bad. No, the rest is great, but the rest without that can be dangerous. If we don't practice the brotherly love, then we might have difficulty of forgiving. We might have difficulty of turning the page. We might have difficulty of looking for ourselves and not looking for you. So my challenge really for you is try to analyze as a couple, what are the dimensions in our love that could grow if we add the brotherly and the sisterly dimension. Try to think of the way of touching one another. It's very different. Now, touching you as a sister or as a brother, it doesn't take away anything. It makes your touch a healing touch. When you touch your fiancé, it's not necessary, it can be, but it can also not be a healing touch. It can be a healing touch, it can be a taking touch. When you touch your sister or your brother, it's never a taking touch. It's a protecting touch. It's a sheltering touch. It's a healing touch. So we have that inside. And I think I would like to invite you to think of your whole body as a place of healing, as a place of giving, as a place of protecting, because we're made for that. And that's why God gave us a body. I spoke with I'm not sure if I mentioned that to you, but I spoke with primary school kids in France here. And I spoke with them about Jesus. Before he became man, he didn't have a body. And then he became man and he had a body. Then when he went back to heaven, a body went up to heaven. Okay, and so there he is as a body together with Mary, who has a body up there. And we're not sure if the other ones already have a body or not. I'm not sure how this works exactly. We'll figure it out one day. Anyways, he did not have a body, but he was already loving. Now, what could we not do if we had a body? If we had not a body, we could not express love. We could not express forgiveness. We could not express patience. We could not express. So basically, the body is mainly there so as to give, so as to forgive, so as to express kindness and love and patience and all of that. What happens, for example, when we drink too much alcohol? Then we oblige our heart to accept what our body decided. Shouldn't that be the other way around? Like, shouldn't it be the heart telling the body what to do? Not the passions, not the feelings, not the instincts, the heart telling the body what to do. Imagine how beautiful if your body could always express what the depth of your heart would want to say. And if your heart would be connected with God, imagine what comes out of that, okay? But sometimes we have separated the body and the heart of the intelligence, okay? And again, as I mentioned to you in the beginning, sexuality, many times in the beginning, it's separated body and heart and spirit and communion and life, and all of that is separated. We have to bring it back again. Okay. So I would like to challenge you with this idea of John Paul II, the sister bride, my brother's spouse, my sister's spouse, and try to practice, try to learn what that would add. Okay, because that will allow you to learn how to have a pure heart and how to look at the other one in the best possible way. Okay, so looking at the other one as a brother will not take anything away from your passion. Don't worry. It will not take it. It will make it just much more healing. Imagine if with your eyes you can heal the other one. And imagine kids come forth from that kind of love. Imagine if the two of you have really pure hearts. Imagine the kind of kids that come out of that. This is not indifferent. This is big time. And what is at stake is really, really big, and what is most precious to you, right? So loving in the right way becomes a great expression of saying yes to one another. Okay. Therefore, we have to remember that what we received, so as to learn to use it in the right way, we make a pact. Okay. We make actually a time of being fiancé, right? How you say that? Being engaged, so as to learn how to love in the right way, and also to learn whether we are in the right condition. And then we make a pact, and the pact we do so as to make sure that we love in the right way. Remember last time we said the sacrament of marriage and the promises we do are not just so as to promise something nice to the other person. It's not just that you are calm, that I've done a promise to you. The promises are also so as to protect us not to be anymore what we could be. Because we very quickly fall into routine and in our bad habits and in our laziness, and in our egoism, and in our anger, and our critics, and all of this happens because we function in it. So it's important. The sacrament protects us and reminds us to love in the right way. And that's why we say loving means respecting your freedom. That's why we say loving means total gift. That's why we say loving has to do with fidelity. That's why we say loving has to do with life. That's why we say loving has to do with respect. That's why we say loving has to do with totality. in good times and in bad times, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. Love is not always lived like that out there. Imagine your love would always be lived like that. So that means the marriage promises help us to remember how love should be. Now, I think what's important for us is to think, like, how are we living our love now? Like, in order to be able to say, I give myself to you, I receive you, how could we live this now in total truth? And what I'd like to do with you now is I'd like to speak a little bit to you about what purity of heart means, okay? Because it's something you will need throughout all your marriage life. You need it now, but you need it as much afterwards, because a heart that is not pure is always a heart that is in danger and that can put others in danger, and that's not what we want, okay? Remember, our heart is wounded. Since the fall of man, we have a tendency of thinking of ourselves, of closing us in ourselves, of wanting love for us, of never getting enough in a way. So we need direction. The day of your wedding, you will say, I give myself to you and I receive you. Now, when I prepare couples for marriage, I wonder, to be able to say, I receive you, well, first, I have to wonder if actually the other one still belongs to God, okay? I receive you means, in a way, it's a good thing before marriage to give the other one back to God. To give the other one back to God so as to be able to receive the other one from God. It's good to try to think the person that is sitting next to you actually doesn't belong to you. It actually will never belong to you, okay? The person that is sitting next to you belongs to God and will always belong to God. The person that is sitting next to you is a work of art that is not yet completed. And God says, this is my work of art. Watch out, this is my work of art. Okay, now, I will entrust this work of art to you so that I and you together can help the other person that this work of art can reach fullness. Be careful, because you have a broken heart, so you might do mistakes. So let's do this together. So that's why the marriage pact is a pact, the two of you together with God, to say, okay, let's do this together, because that's security of having the best possible outcome. Okay, so your fiancé does not belong to you yet. It's very important to know that. The fiancé belongs to God and will always belong to God. God will entrust your fiancé to you the day where you say you want it and you decide it before God and your friends. God will say, okay, deal, I entrust him to you, I entrust her to you, but be careful, it's a child of God, it's not yours. Okay? Make sure that you do with him or with her what I want, what is best for him or her. Make sure that you help God to fulfill his dream over him, over her, and not your dream or his or her dream, okay? God's dream. Make sure that you listen to God and that you ask God, who is she in your mind? Who is he meant to be? Because otherwise I will just do what I think, which is good, but it's maybe not the best, and you want the best for your spouse. Now, the good thing is you can ask that to God and he will answer you. He will put into your heart a deeper knowledge of who the other one is meant to be. This is something that is meant to be like that. So God is somebody who wants to share this with you. Now, you want to ask for God's blessing in marriage. You are telling God, be with us, bless us, stay with us, and we want to be with you. Now, therefore, how great if you say already now, I want to learn to live these months until marriage as much as possible the way you want it for me. But the question is, what is the way God wants it for us? What is the best possible way? What is the best possible way we can live this time of fiancé? And what means the purity of the heart in all of that? Now, God, he says the time of being engaged is a time of discernment. Okay, so it's very important for you to learn to have a pure heart in this time of engagement. Okay, maybe just a merely scientific element that I read recently for the first time. There is an element in the human body which is called the oxytocin. Okay, that is in the woman 10 times more present than in men. And in the woman, it's in charge of creating communion, fusion, empathic, affectivity, all of that, okay? And the man normally has much less of that. But after a moment of sexual union, in the man, this is produced in great abundance. So you say, God is pretty smart, because that means if a man unites himself to a woman, then their union becomes even stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger, really like cement. Now, the thing is, this is meant, and when God created that, he meant that to be something that is exclusive between two persons. Now, the problem is, if I've had relation with many other persons, I've created cement with many other persons in a way, and this cement had to be broken up. So that's complicated, and it kind of weakens the capacity of the cement, okay? It also, in a way, puts me in comparison, or puts you in comparison with other persons I've been with before, which is not top. So later we always realize, well, maybe we've learned a lot, and we realize we've maybe done mistakes. Now, what's important for us is why does the church tell us that it's a good thing to wait with sexuality until marriage? Okay, I know that nowadays, I wouldn't say 100%, but maybe 95% probably of the couples in Europe don't wait with sexuality until marriage, because that's just the way people live. Okay, and most people don't think of it, and it's the most normal thing. And we know James Bond, so we know that's the way you handle it. You meet a girl, you meet a guy, and up there you go. Why does the church still say that? And why is it maybe even better? Now, I would like to challenge you in the sense to say, if the church does that, because the church believes that that's the way God made us. And if God basically is telling us wait, it's probably not because God is evil. It's probably because God knows something better than us, right? Like, you're going to promise the day of your marriage to love freely, fully, faithfully, fruitfully, okay, all the days of your life. When you have relations before, these relations are maybe free, but I think if one lives together before, as we said last time, well, definitely the freedom of the other one is challenged, okay, let's say that. Is it total giving? Well, no, because I'm giving you most of myself, but I'm not giving you all of myself. Okay, so I'm not really living freedom. I'm not really living totality. Am I living faithful? Well, yes, but we're not yet actually one couple. So maybe we are, but maybe we're not. Okay, let's say yes. Am I living open to life? Well, normally not. So that means the way God meant sexuality to be, I'm actually now learning not free, not total, not life, and maybe faithful. And the day I'm getting married, I'm going to live faithful, life, total, and free. So basically, I'm, without at all having the intention, I'm going actually right in the other direction. So I'm going into the direction of, living a non-commitment. And later I'm going to, and you will see, when you open up to life, it's just totally different. What is the challenge? What is the challenge of living chaste or learning? Because I think for all of you, chastity is something to learn. Chastity basically means the art of handling my sexual desires. That's something we all have to learn. We all have to learn how to handle it in the best way so that we can be a good couple together and live this in a way that it helps us most. Now, I think important for us, what most impresses me is to say, to realize when a couple knows that they're going to live chaste, well, when they meet, they know this is not going to be about sexuality. This is going to be about the two of us. This is going to be about getting to know one another better. This is about learning how to have better gestures, how to be kinder to one another, how to learn to be better friends. Now, it's not that this is not the case when we live sexually together, but the problem is when we have sexual moments together, maybe even more for the, or probably more for the man than for the woman, the problem is that this is so powerful for him that it's very difficult for him to be totally focused on getting to know yourself better, learning better gestures, going until the end of our conversations, respecting you fully, because the thought of the sexuality is so powerful inside that it's always mixing inside. It doesn't have to be, but it can definitely. And I think if a man is sincere, he knows that the sexual expectation is something that can make you not being 100% available, not being 100% receptive. I spoke with many couples that actually some months before their wedding, they said, okay, we live together, we live sexually together, and we realized I have never offered my fiancée that I've waited for her, that I've waited for him. I've never offered my fiancée the art of learning to handle my sexuality. I've never actually realized if I'm able to live 100% without pornography, without masturbation, without exercising my sexuality, just learning to have kindness, gestures, listening, going until the end. Well, guys and girls, the time of fiancé is the moment on your life when you can practice that. It's the moment in your life. And it's super important that before you get married, you are 100% sure that you and your spouse can handle your sexuality and can become a gift for the other person. Okay, that's not automatic, and many couples stop having sexual relations afterwards, are being frustrated, don't speak with one another, don't speak about the little details, live frustrations. Why? Because they have different expectations and they've done, maybe mistakes before. I'm not saying that it's bad because God made it, right? So it can't be bad. Okay, but I'm saying that the time you live now is a precious time to learn, to live, to develop as good as possible. Friendship, details of gestures, conversations until the very end, without back thoughts bothering you. Okay, super important. Then also being capable of discerning, like try to think the time of being engaged should be the time we have to be most lucid, you have to be most enlightened, you have to be most attentive, because you're doing a decision, the only decision that you're doing for your whole life. Now, being sexually active puts fog into your brain. You can say whatever you want, but it puts fog into your brain. And it makes you less free and less objective, definitely. So I'm not saying it's wrong or bad. I'm just saying it's not the good moment. So it helps you to discern better. It helps you to wait and to realize, are we able to be good with one another? Are we able to be kind with one another? Am I actually, learning the 95% that are happening around the bed? Then, also it's teaching both of you to be less egoistic, or the danger of egoism, so as to see sexuality not as something where you would take, but where you give. So that is the great time of learning, a time of giving and of receiving and not taking. if a couple has to split up eventually, and this year I had 2 couples that told me we're actually not getting married. Now, the more you've been sexually involved, the more it's going to hurt. The more you're breaking something, the more you've given something to the other that never should be with the other, the more it's complicated, and the more a part of the other one will live inside of you. As a matter of fact, also before marriage, tendentially, sexuality can also be more violent. It's something that happens in the world. I'm not saying that this is happening with you. Why? Because you're not committed yet. You're not totally committed. Okay? In your case, it's maybe different because you have definitely decided to get married. But as a matter of fact, in young generations, it's something that is true. There's much more. Now, there's also the danger of how sincere am I in my approach of you? Okay. Well, what am I looking for when I'm kind? Am I looking for myself or am I looking for you? I'm not saying that this is the case, but I'm saying it's a potential danger. So a pure heart means what? A pure heart means a heart that wants one thing. I want to be good with you. I want to learn to be your friend. I want to learn to be your protector. I want to learn to be united to you. I want to learn to be your greatest accomplice. I want to learn to be a good brother, a good sister. I want to learn to be forever by your side because you need me. That's a pure heart. An impure heart is not a heart that looks at bad things. An impure heart is a heart that says, I'm kind with you, but I'm also waiting for this, or I'm also waiting for that, and I also want that. So I'm being patient because I'm waiting for my turn. That's tragic. That's tragic. But that happens many times in couples. You have many couples that are nice to one another because they want what they want. How sad would that be? Imagine if in a few years you would live like that. But that is the moment to practice it. The moment of practice to communicate in the right way, to focus on the other, not on pleasure, to be sincere and not half sincere, to discern better, to be less egoistic, and simply in your conscience to feel better. Okay. And also, obviously, not the risk of maybe maybe the girl being pregnant, because that is, obviously, if you're together, that's the risk. And that could make it more complicated to be objective if this is the right person. Okay. This is always like this, and this is always a risk. And I've seen couples that have done that and that have done mistakes. So they got married and they should never have gotten married. Okay. So if God invites you to live this time of fiancé as a time of mainly learning to be a good sister, a good brother, learning to be to challenge the other one's freedom, to allow the other one to be free until the very last moment. If you want to live this time so as to have the day of the wedding, God giving me somebody that doesn't belong to me yet. If you want to arrive to your wedding with a pure heart, having given your past into the hands of God, I would definitely invite you to look for the right moment when you say, honey, from today on, we will simply take a step back and not be sexually active so that we can go until the very end in our conversations, in our learning, in our friendship, in our patience, in all of that. And I can tell you, of the couples that I prepare every year for marriage, at least 70% do that. And they all tell me afterwards, this is so good because we were able to focus so much more on the two of us. We're able to learn so much more patience. And I have couples that told me, we just can't. This is just too important for us. And I say, if you can't say no, like what does your yes mean? If you can't wait, what does it mean I give myself to you? It means nothing. I mean, it's like if you're not able to wait for the other person out of love and respect for the other person, what does it mean? So this is a moment you have now, and you will have many moments in your life later when you'll have to learn to wait for the other person. So what I'm saying, the church is not saying sexuality is bad. No. Church is saying sexuality is so good that you better prepare for it well. Okay? You might have experienced all the one you want. Great. But you might have not lived it in truth. And you want to be the best gift for your spouse so that out of your sexual encounters, life can come that is holy, that is pure, that is from the first moment surrounded by God. Okay, and the greatest thing is you're capable of that. Okay, that's why we also do, before, as I mentioned to you when we spoke about the sacraments, before the marriage, I invite the couples to do a confession. Do confession, go with a priest, and leave your past in the hands of God, and also your sexual parts, because you've all done mistakes in some or the other way, normally, and it's good to be able to be free and to be able to say, I receive you, and the other one receives somebody who's really free. Okay, so the time of getting engaged is a time of learning to be free, learning to give yourself, learning to be faithful, learning to receive the other one, learning to be chaste, learning to be united to God. And I would even challenge you, instead of having moments where you unite yourself in body, unite yourself in the soul. Pray together, read something good together, have a discussion that goes further, and I think all of that can help you, that you prepare the ground so that when you get married, you're ready and you can say, I receive you, I give myself to you, and you will always treat your spouse as somebody that you have received from God and somebody that is precious to you. So when Jesus says, love one another as I have loved you, how beautiful if we can say, okay, that's what we want. Because as a couple, this is going to be your great mission, is to love as Jesus taught us. He became man, so he kind of knows what is right. Okay, try to live that from today on. Try to examine your way of handling the other, of looking at the other, of thinking of the other, the way of handling your own body, the way you look, the way you speak, the way you touch, the way you handle your own sexuality and one of the other. Try to love as God, your creator, told you. He says, love one another as I have loved you. This is my body for you. But, trying to learn to be a gift. And you will definitely come to the wedding day as a much more happy person. And that, I think, will install also in your home a place of holiness, a place of purity. And this will allow you to be in coherence with what you know already. Like if you look at your body, as we said before, I know these eyes are for giving, not for taking. I know this mouth is for blessing and not for manipulating. I know these hands are for protecting and not for taking away. And now the sexuality is not for using, but it's for serving, and it's for life, and it's for communion, and it's for being a gift to one another. So that's what I would like to offer you today. We will end us now with a little prayer, and then maybe if some of you has a few questions, you can just go ahead. So, Almighty God, we want to thank you for this moment, and I want to thank you for whatever you told me today. I also want to ask you for forgiveness if I explained things wrong or incomplete. I want to ask you also for forgiveness if my explanation was poor and insufficient. And I ask you for wisdom and understanding so that these couples, but also I as a formator, can learn to be always better witnesses that the way you created us is the best possible way. And if we learn how to live our love life the way you meant it, we're doing the greatest gift for our spouse, for our couple, for our later family. So help us to not play with that, but just to be responsible. Lord, teach us to look at one another as a sister, as a brother, so that then we can learn to be for one another a spouse. And on the intercession of St. John Paul II and of all the holy couples in heaven, may the Almighty God for all of that bless you and strengthen you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, arrêtez.